Joined again by Nora Jacobson, who is the executive director of the project, also joined this time by Douglas and Michael Kusmit, who also played roles in this segment. Nora, talk to me a little bit about this segment in general. This was, the last half was talking about the gay rights and the gay marriage and civil unions effort, which was a huge part of Vermont history, as a huge part of American history. How lucky were you at the time, or did you feel at the time, to be a part of this and to be here for that? And then how did that translate into putting it into the movie?
Well, you have to remember, I am a Vermonter. I was born here, so I sort of am here by default. Right. But yeah, it was very exciting in 2000, the year 2000. I was working on another film at the time that actually had a slight gay theme to it. And so I actually had filmed the demonstration, that one of the civil union demonstrations. So when I realized, well, this has to be part of the Vermont movie, of course, because it's part of the important history of Vermont, I looked in my own archive and found this footage that I had from back in 2000. And so I was able to slot that right in to part 4 of the movie.
And Michael, you were there, and you shot most of the footage for this segment throughout the debate in the legislature. I remember when I was a reporter for Channel 22 at the time, and we were standing right there filming the whole thing as it happened from the balcony in the State House. Take me through your thoughts at the time. Was this one of these things where, as you're filming this, you realize what's going on and its import? Or is it, taken a couple years to realize and see how it's filtered through the country to gauge its real importance?
I had a feeling it was going to be historic, and it was probably the first debate that I captured from start to finish. I had filmed a lot of different segments of different debates through the years in the State House, but what really struck me was that when I actually saw people change their minds. After listening to a careful, thoughtful, deliberate debate, I saw people who were planted on one side or the other actually consider what other people were saying and change their minds. That's what struck me as something historic, but it probably happens all the time.
I'm sure. Let's take a look at a clip from the Vermont movie. This is Michael Kusmit's footage from the civil union debates.
Listen to the result of your vote. Those voting yes, 76. Those voting no, 69. And you have chosen by your vote to pass H. 847.
I love the gavel shattering. That was how Speaker Michael Obuchowski, of course, when his gavel shattered after trying to bang everybody into silence. Michael, tell me a little bit more about, we were obviously sitting up there watching all this. Do you think this is a thing that, Vermont was uniquely qualified to play the lead role in? I mean, do you think this could have happened in another state, or is this a Vermont thing that had to happen here?
No, I mean, we were the first one to do it legislatively, but 17 other states have gone on to recognize gay marriages, and I think it could have happened anywhere. I mean, Vermont is special, but it's happened other places.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Well, I guess I would say that the legislative aspect has always been important. I mean, even in protecting the rights of African Americans in Vermont way back when, even though there was racism on the ground, the legislature always protected the blacks in Vermont. So I think there is a tradition of it.
Sure, absolutely. Douglas, let's turn to you. You were obviously a star, if you will, from part 3 of this movie.
I thought I was blurred out.
Yes, you were blurred out. Yes, you were. And so now here we are in part 4, where you directed the segment on the Billboard law and played a role in making the graphics and that kind of thing. Tell me a little bit about the role of the Billboard law in the state and how you think it's positively or negatively impacted the state. Is this a good thing long term?
No, really the Billboard I had to do really the computer animation. The history or the interviews with, I can't even think of his name now.
Frank Bryan.
Frank, right. Nora cut that whole sequence. I mean, I worked on computer animation, and in terms of billboards, I think it's wonderful that this state took on that question early on. But beyond that, I mean,
I mean, and this is another thing that's uniquely Vermont too. I mean, most of this movie is the uniquely Vermont things, but I mean, the role of the billboard in the state and its impact long term. I mean, is this something that, if it didn't happen back then, would have happened since then? Do you think?
Well, you know, Vermont wasn't the first state. Hawaii, I'm sorry, was the first state to outlaw billboards, but Vermont was the second. And was it? Well, you know, Vermont has such a history of promoting tourism. I think the anti-billboard law was very much a part of promoting Vermont as a beautiful place where people would want to come and visit. So it wasn't just that they didn't want to spoil the Vermont countryside for some, I don't know, altruistic reason. It was because they thought that tourists wanted to come and see the beautiful, unadorned countryside that didn't have billboards all over the place. And so that goes back a long time.
But that was a thing, though, too, because there was almost no documentation of all of the bulletin boards, or billboards, billboards. So that was where I came in. That's where I had to recreate a landscape that actually had them.
Okay, let's take a quick look at a clip from part 4, Doers and Shapers, from the Vermont Movie.
We bragged about the beauty of our state, and yet here were these monstrosities that were blocking the view. It was such a sensible idea.
Tourism, in some ways, it has this fascinating role with it because we're selling an image. And once you sell that image, people get a little antsy if that image isn't here. It's what makes this Vermont as opposed to every state.
And then another portion of this segment obviously talked about Act 250. We have a couple minutes left. I wanted to talk to you about its legacy here in the state too. I remember during the debate over Maple Tree Place in Williston, that came up obviously in the Walmart and all that kind of, those kind of things. What do you think is the legacy of Act 250 in the state? Is it still as powerful and still as needed as it was when it was first created?
Well, some people would claim that it isn't at all. I mean, Howard Coffin in the film says that it's done very little, but as Chris Graff in the film says, Act 250 wasn't supposed to stop development. It was supposed to control it. And I think it has done that. I mean, it hasn't stopped development, but it has made development be something that everyone in a community gets to have an opinion on and come to like a little town meeting, an Act 250 meeting, and talk about how it might affect them. So it really is part of the Vermont tradition of town meeting legislature. So I do think it's very much a Vermont thing. I don't think other states have Act 250s where citizens can actually come and talk about development and give their say.
Okay, that was part 4. Now we move on to part 5. Nora, give us a little preview of Series Children, which is coming up in part 5.
Well, Series Children is about really the land, I would say. It's about the history of land use. It's about protecting our natural resources. And who protects our natural resources? Well, it's the people of Vermont. And that's why Part 5, Series Children, starts with a little history of town meeting and grassroots democracy at work. And in Part 5, we see grassroots democracy actually protecting resources. But then the land is such an important part, and farming is such an important part of that there's a lot about farming too.
Okay, part 5, we will look forward to that of the Vermont Movie. Nora Jacobson, as always, thanks for being here. John Douglas, Michael Kusmit, as well to you. I'm Colin Parker. We will see you back here for part 5 of the Vermont Movie on Vermont PBS.